Okay, you should have this thinking map in your journal. If you don't, please do that now. It's a classifying map. The title is Integer Operation Rules. And then the 4 different categories are adding with the same sign, adding with a different sign, subtracting, and then multiplying and dividing are the same rule. So the only 2 we're worried about today are the first 2. Let's start with adding with the same sign. So if you have 2 numbers with the same sign, meaning they're both positive or they're both negative, the rule is we're going to keep the sign and add like normal. So if you want to draw a little box around that, something to remind you that that is the rule. That is the important part. So if I had, let's do an example. If I had -3 plus -2, they're both negative. So I'm just going to keep the sign. They're both negative, so my answer is negative. And then add like normal. 3 plus 2 is 5. So my answer is -5. Same thing if they were both positive. If I had 4 plus 4, they're both positive, so my answer is going to be positive, and 4 plus 4 is 8. So that's no different than what you guys have been doing all your life, but it works the same way with negatives. Let's do an example with chips. So we use red chips usually to represent negative. So let's do a couple negative chips. If I had -1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say I had -4. So this is -4. And then I added -3. So I added -3. So plus sign. 1, 2, 3. So hopefully you remember 0 pairs from that video we watched. 0 pairs mean a positive and a negative cancel each other out. That's a 0 pair. But there are no positives, so there's nothing to cancel out any of these negatives. So all I have to do is count up how many I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chips all together. So my answer is -7. Okay? Now let's show on a number line what this would look like. So if I had the problem, let's do the negative ones are the most fun. So I'm going to do another negative. Let's do -5 plus -1. Okay? So this would be like if you owe your friend $5 and then you're in debt $5 to your friend, and then let's say you borrow another $1 from them, so you're in debt another $1. So on the number line, let's see what that would look like. So I'm going to start with 0. Over here I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Over here I have -1, -2, -3, -4. And I'm going to make mine go a little bit further. I have -5, -6, -7. Okay, now I'll make my number line. Good enough. Okay, so I always start at 0, so I'm going to start right here at 0. So -5, I'm going into the left to 5 spaces because it's negative. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is where I end up at -5. And then I have to add a -1. So I'm going to start where I ended up, and I'm going to go the negative direction 1 space. So now I've ended up at -6. So my answer is -6. Okay? So make sure you have all that filled in. We have 2 examples, and then I showed you guys with chips and number line. The most important part is that you have your rule, which is right there. Okay, let's do the rule for adding with a different sign. This one's a little bit more complicated, has a little bit of a longer rule. So we are actually going to subtract the 2 numbers, or find the difference between the 2 numbers. Find the difference between the 2 numbers. That's what subtracting is. So then keep the sign of the number with the largest absolute value. So that is your rule. It is a long rule. Make sure you have it all in its box. Make sure you don't forget any part of it. So let's do an example. If I had -6 plus 4, okay? So a situation where you might have this, let's say you're -$6 in your bank account, like you owe the bank $6, but then you put $4 in, okay? So you put $4 in. Now that -6 is still bigger than the 4 that has a bigger absolute value, so you're still going to stay negative. I like to think of it like a tug of war. this 6 is pulling you in the negative direction, and this 4 is pulling you in the positive direction. Since 6 is bigger, it's pulling you farther. So your answer is still going to be negative because 6 has a greater absolute value than 4. Then I just have to find the difference between the two numbers. So the difference between 6 and 4 is 2 because 6 minus 4 is 2. So my answer is negative 2. So in my scenario, if you were negative $6 in the bank, you put $4 in, now you have negative $2. You still owe them some money, but you don't owe them as much as you did before. You only owe them $2. Okay, another example. Let's say I had 15 plus negative 10. Okay, 15 plus negative 10. So the first thing you need to do is figure out which one of these has the bigger absolute value, and that is the 15. So that tells me that my answer is going to be positive because that 15 is positive. All right, 15 is bigger than 10, so my answer is going to be positive. And then I have to find the difference between the two. The difference between 15 and 10 is 5, so my answer is positive 5. Okay, if you were, I don't know, 15 feet above sea level and then you climbed down 10 feet, you're still above sea level, but you're only 5 feet above sea level at this point. Okay, let's talk about what this looks like with chips. So if I had 3 positive chips, so this is, I guess I should have made those yellow. Let's do that. Gives you a chance to catch up. So let's make these yellow because most of the time we do positive chips yellow. So 3 positive. So this means I have positive 3. And then I add, let's add 2 negative chips. So I had 2 negative chips. Now I do have 0 pairs this time. Do you see how this positive and that negative and this positive and that negative cancel each other out? So I'm left with 1 positive. So my answer is positive 1. Okay, let's talk about this on the number line. If I had negative 4 plus 7, let's show that on the number line. My 0 is going to be about in the middle. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. All right, so I always start at 0. And my first number is negative 4. So I'm going in the negative direction, or to the left, 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is where I ended up at negative 4. And then I'm going in the positive direction, 7 spaces. So I always start where I ended. I'm going 7 spaces. So let's try to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's some ugly lines. I'll fix that in just a second. But here's where I ended. I ended up at negative 3, or at positive 3, sorry. So positive 3 is where I ended up. So I started at 0, went 4 spaces to negative 4, and then 7 spaces in the positive direction, ended up at positive 3. Okay, so please make sure that you have those. We will do the rest of this thinking math as we move through this unit, and you will be referencing it all the time, not just during this unit, but all throughout the year. So please make sure you have this all up to date with examples and everything. Shouldn't take too long, so just make sure you have it updated.